Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to movie night. It's been so long. Nearly a year, I think. Actually, maybe the last one was in January. That doesn't matter. I think it's episode 19 if we're still numbering them. I'm not sure if we will anymore, but this is the 2024 recap. As you can see, I've seen 12, count them, 12 movies in 2024. Can you believe it? What a masterstroke. I'm a genius. Nobody has consumed more than me. That's one each month. That's pretty good. Though a bunch of them consumed together because, we got all three X-Men's there. Oh my goodness. But these are the 12 we're going to be talking about. I'm not doing timestamps. Skip around if you want me to hear, if you want to hear me talk about any of them. Those middle four, which I think literally are the middle four. This is crazy. You can find much longer discussions, both on the Ordinary RE fucking channel too, for Madoka and all those X-Men movies. What a disgrace I am, giving all my great views to Elite RE. It's disgusting. And we're going to be doing it again in early 2025 with these shitty Star Wars movies. Blech. But anyway, we're going to go in order of watching. I'll recap sort of my letterbox, not my reviews because I don't write reviews, ratings, etc. We'll talk about what comes to mind. I'm going to try and keep this relatively short, maybe under an hour. It could be crazy. Maybe I'll just yap forever. I don't really have notes on these things. I really want to be for it to be what I can recall from these movies, etc., etc. And Project A-ko and Arrival I've watched in like the last 2 days, so that's crazy. So they might be more on the brain than the others, especially ones like Barry Lyndon, the first movie on the list. My goodness. Barry Lyndon, I actually just want to check the storage real quick. Maybe I should have done this before stream, but what a funny little anecdote for me to do it on it. Barry Lyndon, I watched very much at the beginning of the year. I got 5 gigabytes of fucking storage, bro. We got plenty. I watched it at the beginning of the year. Now, Barry Lyndon is sold on Twitter a lot as like the best movie ever made, unironically. Not that that's something that's impossible to believe or something, but just that is sort of the reputation. Especially whenever it's like, this is a perfect movie shot. Respond with your favorite movie shot or something. There's always someone with Barry Lyndon in their response because the thing to say about this movie is that every shot looks like it's like a Renaissance painting or something. Which might be true. I don't really know because I watched this movie on an illegal streaming service, which was probably in like 10,080p. I can stream bigly over here in Australia. But that doesn't really matter because it still doesn't look very good, especially because I have a big monitor. So I probably need to rewatch this movie to fully appreciate it, I think. I ended up on Letterboxd giving it only 3.5 stars. The average rating is 4.4. I'm telling you, the people love this. It's also a Stanley Kubrick movie. My first ever Stanley Kubrick movie, in fact. But I thought it was middling at best. That's why it gets 3.5 stars. No, there's obviously places where it's very good. It's also 3 hours and 5 minutes long, which probably didn't help it. It very much tells sort of the winding story of Barry Lyndon's life. Now, I think that might not be his name at the beginning, or it might be, and that's like the funny thing, or this is the person he becomes. And it goes through all the stages of his like adult life. Though I think he's maybe supposed to be a teenager at the beginning, when he's flirting with that girl. Should I just reread the letterbox thingy here because that might give you some context rather than my rambling? An Irish rogue uses his cunning and wit to work his way up the social status of 18th century England, transforming himself from the humble Redmond Barry into the noble Barry Lyndon. True, see? His name did change. I remember something. And if you look on Letterboxd, the image here is like him smoking a pipe with this hot girl next to him, and you're like, oh, I kind of know where this movie is going. It's like about this swashbuckling rogue, and he's just going to trickster his way up. He's going to be telling jokes, he's going to be being funny, he's going to be being cool, he's going to be shooting a guy and running off, and he's going to steal his identity and fuck his wife. Isn't this great? That's not really what the movie is at all. This Barry Lyndon guy is like this very boring, like wide-eyed, gets tricked into leaving home because he thinks he assassinated a guy, but it was all a setup so he could marry the girl he likes back back in Ireland because he's from Ireland, and then he ends up joining the army, I think the British army, and then he takes on a bunch of different identities. He like deserts or something, and then he gets caught and has to be in like the Prussian army, and then he becomes a spy because he can speak English, and then like he gets in with the guy he's supposed to be spying on to help assassinate, and then they both escape, and then he ends up in noble France or something, and he ends up stealing like an old man who's dying's young wife because he's dying, and she's gonna get all of his money, and they already have a kid together, and then he has a kid with the woman, and then that's a lot of the drama towards the end because I think he ends up like sedating her and getting her killed, and then her son like gets revenge on him and ends up shooting him, but then he survives in the end, but he loses his leg, and he has to go back to his humble beginnings as a poor Irish farmer or whatever, and it's like oh full circle. He got greedy and he fell down. So it's sort of like that it's kind of like the Scorsese-esque structure. Except without any of the Scorsese flair, I would say. I wonder how much of this comes down, or my like not connecting with this comes down to Stanley Kubrick as a director, because obviously he's made a bunch of movies, right? Hitchcock is the Psycho guy. He's the 2001 guy. That had slipped my mind, but I definitely know that he made The Shining. He made Clockwork Orange. He made Eyes Wide Shut. The only one I really know, well, I do know a lot about 2001, but only like conceptually. I know The Shining things and Clockwork Orange imagery, Full Metal Jacket too. Eyes Wide Shut is the one I've seen the most of, just because I remember watching the Red Letter Media video, kind of shitting on it, I think. Basically the thing is like, oh, the dialogue is very funny and corny in Eyes Wide Shut, but it wants you to take it seriously, and people sort of make fun of it for that reason. I think that's kind of the same issue with Barry Lyndon, is like, it's very cheesy and corny and like genuine in a way that I don't really like. There is no self-aware rogue like this great description on Letterboxd promises. It's all like, he just is like kind of mean, and that's why he's a rogue, but he's not mean in a cool way. He's mean in like a pathetic way, especially to his like wife. Where the scene even that is on the Letterboxd thing where he ends up blowing smoke in her face. It's not like a cool, like, she mouthed off and then he blew smoke in her face. She's like, oh, I want to go and do this thing, and he blows smoke in her face because she's annoying him or something. So yeah, the Barry Lyndon, for the movie that's 3 hours and 5 minutes almost exclusively about Barry Lyndon, is very boring to me. And that's probably the general problem with the movie from my perspective. Obviously, there are shots that even in the non-4K resolution I was watching it in that did look very pretty. Obviously, a lot of the framing is really cool. But in terms of character and plot and dialogue and even acting, like, it's all in a style that I really didn't appreciate at all. Though I am again very open to rewatching it and changing my mind. The people, they love this old what do you call it, Barry Lyndon movie, 4.4. And we got Roger Ebert down here giving it a 4-star, which means a 5-star. Ralph the Movie Maker, YMS, I Hate Everything. Those guys have a terrible podcast. All 5 stars. That Taylor Williamson guy who makes some good videos, 5 stars. But anyway, that's all I really think I have to say about Barry Lyndon. I remember the marching scene. That was pretty cool. After that, of course, we have a much better film, Shakespeare in Love. We love love stories here. Shakespeare in Love is like it's not biographical, but it's starring Shakespeare. I guess I'll just read the thingy again. I gave it 4 stars. The rating on Letterboxd is only 3.3 stars. What are they thinking here? But the little summary here is, young Shakespeare is forced to stage his latest comedy, Romeo and Ethel. That doesn't seem right. The Pirate's Daughter. Before it's even written. Oh my goodness, what a conundrum. When a lovely noblewoman auditions for a role, they fall into forbidden love, and his play finds a new life and title. As their relationship progresses, Shakespeare's comedy soon transforms into tragedy. Because they have to split up at the end. I'm crying. This movie is a rather confident love story. You know, it's very it feels very family movie, even though you get to see Gwyneth Paltrow's boobs for a second. So, you know, it's not that family. But it sort of has the structure of sort of a family, I guess, with the tragic ending, which isn't usually in sort of family movies, where it's like, he's going to make a play, and then he has to go and get all his friends to be in the play, and there's people around him that don't want him to be in the play, and he falls in love with the rich girl, but she has a boyfriend she's supposed to marry that she hates, who's a rich arsehole, and the Queen Elizabeth something, probably the first one, since the second one only recently died, and this is from way back in the day, I can figure out history on the fly. She is also meddling in the affairs, etc., and he's not the Shakespeare that history knows yet, he's just a young Shakespeare. And Romeo and Ethel, those are like two Shakespeare plays in one, so obviously he has to split them up. There's a million Shakespeare references in this that I'm pretty sure went completely over my head. I've had supposedly read Romeo and Juliet in grade 11. I think it was grade 10, actually. I remember most of it, in fact, but do I remember any specific examples or names? Marchique or something? Romeo and Juliet, I remember those. Capricorns and Baguettons or something. But I think Ethel, the Pirate Store, is a different play. And obviously Romeo and Juliet becomes a play. But it seems to imply that the girl, like when the girlfriend, played by Gwyneth Paltrow here, leaves at the end, it's like she is the inspiration of Ethel or something. There's some sort of reference at the end that's like the whole last scene where she's doing a monologue of it. It's supposed to be like the bittersweet ending, where I think you're supposed to get it because you're supposed to know that this is like, oh, she literally was the Shakespeare character and this is where he gets the inspiration or whatever. Even though it's all like made up. It's like a clever little thing, I don't entirely understand, but I got that it was trying to be clever, and I'm pretty sure the comments told me on a YouTube video one time or something. But yeah, so a lot of the draw is that sort of family aspect of, and like she's not supposed to play in the movie, she has to dress up like a boy because girls can't be in plays and all the girls in plays have to be boys dressed up. And like, but she's actually secretly there, and then they don't know that it's the two of them because they're in like secret love, and then they're doing the Romeo and Juliet scene with the balcony and the throwing the rock or whatever, and etc., and then they find out and there's a reveal moment, but then she gets exposed for being a woman, but then I think the Queen comes down and lets her play in it, and the woman that plays the Queen in this, Judi Dench, right? Hold on, let me just scroll over a little bit. Yes. Like, she wins an Oscar even though she has, like, 3 scenes for this movie, and, like, her speech at the end is great about how, like, she is held down or something because she's a woman, and there's a feminist message at the end where she's like, yes, I do know, or something, and it's, like, very well acted. That is probably the best scene in the movie, and she tells that, she calls the other boyfriend, like, a cuck and says, get out of here, you're a loser. And she has to run away. I think she does end up having to marry him in the end anyway. But yeah, it's like, there's some up and down moments. It's not exceptionally good. I only gave it 4 stars, but it probably was one of my more favorite movies of the year. It's just sort of like it engages the emotions. It goes fast, I feel. I would recommend it. I liked it a lot. I think that's really all I have to say about it, It was cool when they kissed and stuff. But after that, my goodness, we moved on to broadcast news, which is another one of my favorites of the year. On Letterboxd here, it says I've only given it fucking 4 stars. I'm pretty sure this is a 4.5 star movie. I might change it on the fly. What are you going to do? You can't stop me. This is a 1987 movie about ethics in broadcast news, I guess. We'll just read the little thingy here. Basket Case Network news producer Jane Craig falls for new reporter Tom well, I don't remember these names. A pretty boy who represents the trend towards entertainment news, the entertainment news she despises. Aaron Something, a talented plain correspondent, carries an unrequited torch for Jane. He's in love with her. It's a love triangle, guys. Sparks fly between the three as the network prepares for big changes, and both the news and Jane must decide between style and substance. This movie is like really interesting and unique in a lot of ways. It's sort of an office drama regarding the news. There are a lot of cool like news porn things where it's like, oh, this is how a news broadcast works, and they're all like running around and getting there at the last minute and saying this is what you got to say and this is the line and something, where it's like interesting just from that sort of standpoint. But then the threesome, I was going to say. The love triangle here is interesting because the main girl is very interesting. Now, she's like not in much, right? What's her name? Where is she? Fucking Holly Hunter. She's like Invisibirl or whatever. Yeah, the Elastigirl from fucking The Incredibles, which is funny because you'll hear her voice and you'll recognize it. And she's the senator in Batman vs. Superman, who could forget? She is really good in this movie. Very unique sort of character where she is like the genius news girl who's like, even though she's a girl, she's destroying all these men and everything. She's obviously like the right girl for the job. She's like giving speeches about how we can't let entertainment, and we need to give strict news, and we need to be honest, and like all the good things, all the ethical news things. And then she falls in love with the pretty new what do you call it, news anchor, who's also trying to be a reporter too and wants her help in doing everything. And he sort of represents all, well, he's only got the job, he's never been in news at all, he just got hired because he was handsome, and, you know, he doesn't really know anything, and he's being thrust into this position. And then the third guy has, like, worked at the news station forever, he's not as handsome, he's trying to be a news anchor, he's also trying to be a journalist and stuff like that, he's not really good at either of them. He's more earnest, but he's more whiny, and then these three sort of collide in a bunch of ways, and he's, like, best friends with the girl and stuff like that. But she likes the other one. And it's funny because she kind of meets the other dude before she knows they're going to be working together, and she like tries to sleep with him then, and that sort of dynamic is really interesting towards the beginning. And then there's almost like a Me Too thing, but the other way with the guy where he's like, oh, I think you only don't like me because I didn't sleep with you. Now that sounds like a very generic line, but the way it's like, oh, you would give me the opportunity, if that sort of thingy, and that personal thing, and the way she blows it off is even interesting. Everything I think that's interesting about this movie is in sort of the performances and the like idiosyncrasies. This sort of the themes here sort of come to a head at the climax where there's like they're sort of broadcasting something that's a little false, and it sort of rings into the integrity of the main handsome guy and stuff like that. But he's also so earnest. He's like silly, but he's not like a dumb, goofy character. He's just like clearly in over his head, but he's very good at sort of rising in this environment, and everybody likes him. It's just sort of his natural charisma, and the character dynamic is so interesting. I feel like right now I'm like, man, I gotta rewatch this movie. It's so good. I like the way it concludes. I was like spoiling everything in Barry Lyndon, but I kind of don't want to spoil this now. I don't know. This is very much a movie for me, I think, where it's sort of like office drama. I'm like, oh, I love Mad Men. And then it's like, oh, interesting characters who are like very unique in a lot of ways. Even if they all kind of fit into these archetypes and they're all in interesting situations, it's an interesting environment. And it's set in the 80s too. Well, obviously it was made in 1987. It was contemporary for the time, you know, but even still for us, it's like, oh, this is like a preview into a past. And it's like, are they supposed to be in New York? It's just like, oh, that 80s city aesthetic is so cool. I just love everything about this movie. It's got a 4.0 on Letterboxd. The people love it too. But yeah, I guess that's broadcast news. What a movie. Everybody should watch it. What are we doing here? I really hadn't heard of this movie. I think I saw a Broe Deschanel Letterboxd review how she was like, oh my god, the main guy's so sexy. And I was like, oh my god, I gotta watch this. What's he doing? And it is just sort of like his portrayal is incredible. It's like so genuine and like nice, and but like inquisitive, but also like stupid. And let me tell you something, these girls, they love it when you're a little stupid, but you're also nice. I've learnt this over the years, and that's like the archetype for success over here. But he's also conniving. You always underestimate these stupid ones, and they end up cheating on you, huh, ladies? You know, that's just how the dynamics go. Though he doesn't cheat on her, only in the spiritual new sense in the movie. But, you know, all has to be revealed. They're at the airport at the end. My goodness, what's going on? And there's like a flash forward. Oh, it's the craziest fucking movie of all time. You know, what the fuck are we doing here? These were all sort of my cluster of movies at the beginning of the year. This fourth one was the last one, which was Spotlight. Spotlight is a movie about, this is another based on a true story movie, about exposing the Catholic Church for molesting children story back in 2001. I remember it's in 2001 because 9/11 happens in this movie and it derails the plot. Not really in the movie, but the plot of the characters in the movie, because they all have to go, instead of following this story, every news person in the world had to talk about 9/11 for like 3 months. We'll read the little letterbox thing. The true story of how the Boston Globe uncovered the massive scandal of child molestation and cover-up within the local Catholic archdiocese. It's not... that's a word or something. It's not... I was going to say archies... There was another word I was thinking of, but it's not that word. But now I've forgotten that word. Shaking the entire Catholic Church to its core. Crazy. So everybody makes this joke. This is like a omnipotent? I think I'm trying to say ubiquitous, like, joke nowadays is like, oh, Catholic Church, they're touching kids. You ever notice that everything that's like ubiquitous all comes from like, or is like, finally, like the final step of its popularization is in Family Guy memes. Like the Iraq War just being for oil or whatever, which I'm pretty sure is like demonstrably not true, is just like, oh, that's like a Family Guy meme, and that's how everybody knows it. Or that's how like it perforates. I'm losing all my words today. And another thing, like the Catholic Church jokes, you know it's real and true because Family Guy does it a bunch. Family Guy is the arbiter of what is and isn't in the collective conscience, of course. This movie is interesting. It's interesting how it's shot. It's not dramatized too much, which is admirable, I think, in a way. The cast is like crazy. It's like Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton, and then John Slattery, who is Roger in Mad Men. Well, I kind of watched it because I was like, oh my god, he's going to be in an office environment telling people what to do and being really dramatic. And I think he's on the good guy side. He's barely in this movie. And at some points, he's even like, sort of like, he's not an antagonist at any times, but he's kind of being frustrating in following the story and stuff like that. It's much more about the new guy that comes in, the new editor guy, who sort of gets the ball rolling on this and is sort of an outsider, and part of the message of the movie is sort of you need an outsider to come in to like realize how fucked up things are, specifically in Boston here. Another thing with it being based on a true story, it's so interesting. There's a scene where like they're like trying to uncover, and they keep coming to dead ends of people like not wanting to speak about it or whatever. And then there's just like one time where they like find an old priest and he's in a house, and he just like admits it to the reporter right away. Like as soon as she opens the door and starts asking like the first question, she doesn't even press him or judge him or anything. He's like, yeah, it wasn't bad because like I was giving the kids blowjobs and not the other way around. And then like his like sister or something comes and says, go away, like what are you doing telling him? And it's like, that's such a real life thing where if that happened in like in a normal movie, we'd be like, how convenient. What is a guy what's the motivation for this character? He's just admitting it. But in real life, shit like that happens all the time. People will just tell you the crimes they've committed, like even if you're a reporter, because people are just really dumb. And that stood out to me. I still think about that all the time, where I'm like, what a great plot point that could only be done in a movie like this and be taken seriously, because I'm assuming that's taken from a very real life conversation that the real life equivalent of the female news reporter in that scene went through. It is, I don't know, the framing of this movie, the way it's shot and stuff, it's not like shot like a documentary at all, or even trying to do that. It's shot like a normal movie, but it is more like, if we put that on like a graph on a spectrum, it is somewhere more towards that angle of like very low dramatization, very real feeling characters and conversations, very, I don't know, I feel like a movie like this could be done really poorly, where the message is like so ham-fisted and thrown at you like some crazy shit. If a YouTube video was about this, it would be hyper dramatic, and there would be dramatic sound cues, and it would be like, and these fucking priests, then they raped the kids, and like the dramatic music would come in. Whereas it's like so, I don't know, it's so like, I don't want to say professionally handled or well handled. There's a word that you meets in the middle of those two words, I think. Where it doesn't moralize constantly, and that sort of helps the effect of like how sort of repugnant it feels, or like how systemically it was covered up by everybody, and how there's like a scene with Michael Keaton's character where he's at a bar with like, I don't know, one of the like oligarchs of Boston, and he's like, oh, so this is how it always happens. Like a guy leans on another guy, and the guy turns the other shoulder or something, and then the story gets buried forever. And there's even like a moment at the end where it's like they're at the news and they're like, oh, all this was like sent into the news like 11 years ago, but you guys ignored it. And it's not until later that Michael Keaton realizes that he was the guy that ignored it originally. He just gets so many stories and it seems so fantastical that he didn't even remember that he rejected to look at any of the evidence for this in like the past or whatever. There are moments like that which stick with you after the movie, I think. I don't know. I think it was refreshing. I only gave it 4 stars, though. I don't think it ever hit like a. I think this is another movie where I came into it with different expectations of like, oh, John Slattery's going to be fucking Roger Stoning it around. That's not the guy. That's like a political guy. Roger Sterling around. Which was not the movie at all. It was a very different type of movie. But I wasn't upset in the moment. So again, another like maybe a rewatch would bump it up a little bit. I think this is the second best picture winner we've talked about. I think Shakespeare in Love very controversially won. I think the year Saving Private Ryan or some big movie or Forrest Gump or something should have won it, but instead Shakespeare in Love won it. I watched a YouTube video about how Harvey Weinstein made that happen or something, and it was like, oh, what a corrupt guy. Remember when he raped those women? This is another thing he did. Which is funny, because I feel like this one's also a little controversial, because 2015 had another thing. Is this like the Birdman year? I don't think so. Oh my god, The Witch came out in 2015. Crazy. The Martian, Ex Machina. I feel like these are all... The Revenant. I think... No, only Leonardo DiCaprio won the fucking Oscar or whatever for that, huh? But Spotlight was cool and interesting, mostly presentationally. And I guess in the way it was acted. But those were all the cluster. I think this is all before I went to New Zealand the second time, and then I came back and I don't think I watched any movies. This is a very dead year for movies for me. All these movies were sort of watched either out of necessity, especially after this point, because I had to do them for series, like because we're going to get to the Madoka movie right now. And then X-Men, obviously, these are 2 series things. I guess we'll be brief with these 4 just because there are 2-hour videos for each of them. Well, I guess the X-Men ones are all collective, where I talk about them in more depth. The Madoka movie, I gave 4 stars. This is, thinking back on it now, this is probably the best Madoka stuff. Obviously, the best Madoka singular moment. Obviously, I just made a video about, so I don't think anything in this movie is particularly that good. But all of, like, numbers 2 through 8 on, like, the best Madoka moments are all in this movie. Like, the cake song or whatever at the beginning, them just hanging out, Homer on the bus trying to figure out what the fuck is happening. What a great sequence. Her like saying goodbye, or is it Madoka saying goodbye to her parents? That scene's really good. Obviously her turning on Madoka at the end. The fight with her and Mami is really cool. Sayaka showing up and faking out that she's the bad guy. Sayaka using her like clown thing as like her thing is epic. The little kid, the little toy thingy that becomes a magical girl that's actually the thing that killed Mommy, she's very cute, Charlotte or whatever. And fucking Homer's killing her at the beginning, that was crazy. And then Kyuko is also really cool. I think I'm getting even all the names right. I love Madoka Magica. Hold on, is it Kyuko? I'm scrolling through the thingies here. Oh, Kyoko? I don't know, I'm saying it right probably. Yeah, it's all cool, and it's cool seeing them all together. There's a bunch of action scenes that are really good. There's a transformation scene that's really good. This movie is great. I'm talking myself up to 4.5 starring it. But I think I gave both this and Madoka, the original series, an 8. No, I feel like my reason for all that was because I gave Diebuster a 9. I'm like, Diebuster's way better. But I've since bumped Diebuster up to a 10. I don't know how I would ever even consider it not being a 10. I'm disgusted with myself. So maybe we can bump all of Madoka up to a 9. But I don't know if the TV show's that good. It's a little meandering. It's very structured at some times. It's also fast. I don't know. There's some Madoka episodes that aren't that great. But also, this is like Madoka's visual splendor at its like height. And it's very, very, very strong visually. So, pretty great. We love this movie. I didn't even read the thing. Following Madoka's rewriting of the universe, sacrificing herself and her happy normal days to save all magical girls from the cruel fate that awaited them by wiping witches out of existence, the despair still manifests into creatures known as nightmares. Magical girl Homura Akemi continues to fight alone in hope that she will be able to see Madoka smile again. None of that's true. What a misleading little title thingy here, but great, great movie. We love the Great Madoka movie. Then we move into all 3 X-Men movies that I've all given 3.5 stars. I think this is because I liked X1 a lot more than people do. I feel like that's a little low for these. That seems like I fucking hate them. Like, I guess I did like Shakespeare in Love more. And I think I gave Barry Lyndon the same amount, but I guess it's strong in other aspects. Maybe Barry Lyndon should be a 3-star movie. I feel like I'm getting in trouble if I keep shit talking that movie. The X-Men movies were an interesting, like a meta thing to go back and watch. I think they're cool in a lot of aspects. I think they're overwrought in some aspects. And, I went in thinking that the third one was the best. I feel like me and Alidori both thought that. And then we both got there and were like, there is too much going on in this movie. Which I feel like is a lot of what everybody says. Now, I don't think either of us still, some people think it's like the worst superhero movie ever made or something. Which I certainly don't think is true. Because I think they're all about the same. But yeah, I'm struggling to, remember specific things I think about these movies. X2 has a long final act, I feel like. That's what I remember. I remember the Jean Grey stuff being bad in X-Men 3, but everything else being, good. Where she's, not really a person, and etc., etc. I think for these ones I'm going to pass and just say, go watch the Great X-Men review. You've probably already seen it if you care and you're this far into this video. Yippee! After that, are we right into challenges? I think we are. Oh my god. And the movie of the year! Now, I haven't really said anything to anybody about Project A-ko or Arrival, though if you checked my letterbox, you probably would have seen what I had given them. But definitively, maybe my favorite piece of media all year. I'll probably talk about this in my next video that's going to come out, which will be my year recap. I probably will rate. I'm trying to think of anything that was better that I watched this year than Challenges. Challenges is incredible. The big meme for me is that I hadn't seen a 5-star movie in so long. I think before this, the last movie I gave 5 stars. What even is it on here? Was The Crucible. Rewatching that, which is great. We love The Crucible here. But that was a rewatch. Before that, it was Casablanca. But Casablanca was 4.5 stars for a long time. Casablanca is carried by having the greatest opening 50 minutes of a movie ever. Looking back here, I still don't see any. This is before I started rewatching things. Everything here. I guess Portrait of a Lady on Fire was probably the most recent one before that I definitively watched and gave 5 stars. Though Challenges, I do think I gave 4.5 stars for a little bit and then changed my mind in an hour. Now, since then, I've also gone back and changed some things. Polite Society is now 5 stars. It was 4.5 for a long time. Always because I think the teething process and getting into sort of the vibe of that movie at the beginning is sometimes difficult. And I've watched it have I watched Polite Society 3 times now or just 2? But I think it might be 2. But both times at the beginning, I was like, oh, that was a little cringe bit of dialogue there. But then you always get into it and you're like, oh no, this is what the movie's doing. This is the greatest fucking movie of all time. Now, there are a bunch of other 4.5 star movies here that I'm like, oh, maybe they'd bump up. Killers of the Flower Moon has 4.5 stars. I know it had 4 stars originally, so it's crept up to that. But I have gotten the urge recently just to rewatch that movie, and I think when I rewatch it, I probably will give that a 5 star. There's Lady Vengeance, which I gave 4.5 stars, which could be bumped up. And same with Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Those are both really good movies. I also gave Love Actually 4.5 stars, but that would probably stay at 4.5 stars, I think. But there's another one down here that I was just skimming through that I'd forgotten that I was like, that's probably... Oh, Casablanca was another one that was 4.5 stars for a long time. Casino down here is 4.5 stars. That was 4 stars for a little while. I've sort of edited a lot of these. Even down there, we got Wolf of Wall Street at 4.5 stars. Then, we got about 4 Harry Potter movies with 5-star ratings. I ain't fuck around, Good is good. Oh, Apocalypse Now also has 4.5 stars, and I could easily see that one bumping up on a rewatch. The more I think about Apocalypse Now, the more I like it. I think I did also originally give that 4 stars and was a little disappointed in it. But, things change. Challenges, though, within the 2 hours of finishing it, I gave it 5 fucking stars. I'm looking at Letterboxd and I'm seeing that the overall rating is only 3.9. How about you kill yourself, you fucking morons? Challenges is like incredible. Challenges is a tennis movie. I guess I reconvene my thoughts. Let me read this. Tennis player turned coach Tashi has taken her husband Art and transformed him into a world-famous major champion. To jolt him out of his recent losing streak, she signs him up for a challenger event, close to the lowest level of pro tournament, where he finds himself standing across the net from his former best friend and Tashi's former boyfriend. Sex! We're having sex here. 3-way sex. We're actually not. Now, the trailer came out for this, and there was a shitty Twitter discourse about it, but it did help it go viral. Spoiler alert, that scene where they're both kissing on her neck results in blue balls and no sex. Very disappointing, and there is no threesome scene in the movie, unless you consider the tennis scenes the threesome scene, which the movie kind of does. Isn't that cool? Oh, I gotta let the cold air in, chat. I'm fucking dying out here. Zendaya is maybe the worst part of this movie, but the more I think about it, and when I think about it, I do only really think about her. There's some parts where I'm like, because I really haven't seen Zendaya in anything besides Spider-Man. I haven't seen Dune. I haven't seen, what's the show? Euphoria. I really should watch Euphoria. I'm pretty sure I would like it. But even in clips I've seen of Euphoria and like YouTube videos, I've always seen like even if the clip is like Zendaya really acted her ass off in this scene, I'm always like, I don't know if I like her acting. And there are moments in this movie where I felt similarly, but then I'm like, I think it might just be the cool factor. I've been thinking about The Godfather a lot recently, like the last 2 days, because, me and Alita Ari still have to do our discussion on it, and I think Alita Ari is going to end up saying, like, I don't really understand why people think this movie is the greatest movie of all time, even though he said he liked it a lot, and he just said it was too long, boring. The boringest opinion you can have, you can bank on that idiot Alita Ari having it. Or the most Zoomer opinion. We hate Zoomers here. Where the fuck was I going with this before I started that bullshit? Oh, and I've come to the conclusion in my head arguments that I'm going to have with Alita Ari and a question he's not going to ask, is that The Godfather really is considered the greatest movie of all time just because of the aesthetic. Because it's like cool dudes sitting down, pretending they know everything, and like being wise. And like the script reinforcing it. And then them winning in the end. Whether it's Vito or whether it's Michael for most of it. Just like the idea of them sitting in a chair listening to somebody and then responding in like a quaint 2-sentence. It's like the ultimate power fantasy for like non-retards that think like Guts is a power fantasy. But it's also really pathetic in that sense. But that's cool. Part of me thinks part of Challenge's success, the sentence I'm about to say is part of Challenge's success is the aesthetic, which is obvious, right? Aesthetically, it is really good. Even if you wanted to write a detailed essay about the aesthetic in the movie, like that would be something you could very easily do and nobody would question it because obviously this movie has strong aesthetic. But I think the appeal of this movie and the reason why I think of Zendaya every time, Zendaya? That second one sounds cringe. Zendaya. But that also sounds wrong. When you think about this movie, you think about her looking cool in her sunglasses, being sexy, watching them play tennis. And like her walking around like she owns the place and like mouthing off and like just being really cool. So what I'm trying to say is I think Challenges is the Godfather of our age, and rather than a stoic man with dark hair sitting down ordering people killed, it's a woman domineering over men, and that's where we are in society. And thank God I was born in this era. But also, like, the watching experience. That was kind of a mean point. But actually, Like, the watch experience for this movie is so great. Like, the whole time I'm on, like, the edge of my seat. I have no idea what's going to happen, and I'm often very bored, in a sense, with movies where I'm like, well, this is where we're going. And it's more and more became obvious to me that I think I do just like things that do things that I don't see coming or that I've never seen before. Like the scene, which is, again, the letterbox image here of, like, when she does, I think she ends up having sex with him, but she at least kisses the bum one. What are their names? Art and... what's the other one? Patrick. Though we like Patrick. He's kind of the bum one who doesn't do very good, but he's also, like, the one that stands up for himself, so we kind of like him more. Them making out in, like, the storm, in the red light and shit like that, and you're like... and, like, her getting in the car and, like, you thinking... so she leaves the apartment with the boyfriend to go meet this guy because he wants her to coach her now, and it's like, it's very obvious that she's, like, not really in love with her husband. She's more in love with the idea of making him the best tennis player because she really loves tennis, but she can't do it anymore because she got injured, and she can't do it at the top elite level because she's a woman, and these two boys are, like, pissing it away, and they care more about her than they just want to love her rather than loving tennis. And it's like a frustration of, like, those that can can't, and those that can't can, and etc., etc. But she's like, leaves, and, like, is she gonna fuck him? And then she gets in the car and she's like, I'm not here to fuck you, idiot. And you believe it. That sounds like something a tsundere character says or something, but you believe it, and she just wants to drive, and they're, like, talking through whether or not they should, because they're having the tennis match tomorrow. It's very complicated. We love the plot here. It's actually not very complicated. I've just dived into the climax and have to restate all the backstory. But playing with your expectations in that scene of like, is she gonna kiss him, is, like, crazy. And that sounds so generic, and, like, the impression you would get if you haven't seen the movie of the movie from what I've said is, like, crazy about, like, oh, it's this love thing. But they are, like, fighting the whole scene, and they, like, hate each other. But they love each other too. And it's, like, the epitome of toxic. And then she goes back into bed. She goes back to her husband, and he's sleeping with their kid in their bed, and it's like, oh, she feels bad, but they don't linger on you feeling bad. It was very Mad Men in that aspect of, like, but it's almost even above Mad Men in terms of, like, apathy and like, not moralizing it. I feel like a lot of people will go into this movie. Like, I feel like if I watched this movie with my girlfriend, she would just be mad about the cheating and stuff like that. Which I feel like is what a lot of people might come away from this movie thinking. I feel like I did watch a reaction of this, and, like, when you look up, like, challenges reactions, it's, like, a bunch of girls reacting to it, like, clearly in it for, like, the relationship drama, and, like, the steamy, oh my god, did you see when those two pretty boys were kissing her neck in the trailer? This is crazy. The movie has a lot more going on than that, and, like, those actions mean a different thing. And because a bunch of them will be like, what a messy relationship, I feel like. But it's like, no. Like, we don't care that she's cheating on everything. It's about what truly matters, which is, like, tennis. But tennis is representative of, like, finding thrills in your life. And that's, like, more important than stupid fucking monogamy or, like, your marriage or something stupid like that. And it, like, comes out at the end. When I initially watched the movie, the ending, like, disappointed me, where I was like, yeah, I can't tell which one of them's going to win and the implication this is going to have for the rest of the narrative. But then they get into the final rally, and she gets up and she screams again, like she did earlier in the movie when she was in her own rally, and it's like, oh, like, they all are getting what they wanted, and all the other, like, relationship stuff that we are putting onto it is superfluous. Of, like, this is not what life's about. Life is about this moment where, like, they're at the apex of this final tennis rally, and, like, she can feel it and they can feel it and they all feel connected, and it's sort of like, oh, they're having their threesome now. They're, like, meant to be together in this, like, tennis moment. But it's not actually. It's just, and you feel it because of the way the scene is being built up and the music and the scene. Oh, it's the greatest movie of all time. There's another moment where, because again, it's playing with your expectations, where it's like, the movie is kind of cheesily setting up that, like, oh, they, at the beginning of the movie, they had a tennis match and the winner got her a number, and, like, the build up to the end of the movie is like, oh, they're gonna have a tennis match and the winner is going to get her as sort of, like, the prize. And there's a moment where, like, this is like kind of being, it's like kind of like a meta thing, but then the characters sort of become aware of it, not in like any meta sense like the characters are aware. It's just sort of like you put you're in the same mindset, just in two different layers. And they kind of verbally, the husband and wife, so Zendaya and Art, because I can't remember the actor's name. I love it when you use an actor's name and the character name together. It's very funny. There's sort of a scene where he wants her to tell him that it doesn't matter if he wins tomorrow, like, about their relationship. And she ends up telling him that it does matter. But you're like, in your head, you're trying to think of, like, obviously nobody cares about tennis so much that they will ruin their marriage. Because it's like a masculine fear, and a lot of the, or a masculine insecurity, and a lot of the movie is playing off of this. And it sort of does the belittling thing, but kind of not, where it's like a woman's perspective is like, oh, these fucking boys poking their dicks around like it matters or whatever. You idiots don't understand. But, like, the masculine thing is like, well, if there's a Giga Chad on the other side of the tennis court just fucks you in a tennis match and your wife is over there who's also your coach, who is also an ex-tennis player, sees it, obviously she's gonna want to fuck the Giga Chad that just beat you. And it's like an emasculating thing of like, oh, and then he gets his prize if he gets to have sex with her and everything like that. And the whole time you're like, oh, this is just a silly male insecurity. Like, the movie's like playing into that, but we're kind of all aware that we're better than that. And then for it to sort of go in the direction of her telling him, like, yeah, that's what's going to happen. She doesn't say the sex part or whatever, but she's like, yeah, it does matter, and I might leave you if you don't win tomorrow. But there's also an added layer of, like, she also, like, the layers, like, she cares more about tennis than she does their relationship. There's, like, 3 layers to this scene. It's so great. It's, like, comes out, it's, like, a subversion of, like, how you expect the scene to go and how you don't expect the movie to, like, play into, like, male insecurity and have the female character validated. And then there's, like, a scene where he's, like, cuddling and whimpering up to her, which is not really... The way I'm describing it, the way, like, the archetype of the movie presents it, like, the husband guy is, like, pathetic, but there are so many moments where he is so not pathetic in such a refreshing way, where the dynamic never lets you fall into the archetype of, like, oh, this is, like, the Giga Chad seedy one who's actually going to get the girl in the end because we're going to root for him because he doesn't have the fame and everything. But he's struggled, and this is his big opportunity. And the other guy, which is, like, the husband who doesn't even need, the wife is propping him up and everything. But these are actually not, and he, like, snuck into her good graces while the other one, like, it's just, like, them in the steam room, what a great scene, especially for Art's characterization. This scene, again, like, you're kind of supposed to be like, oh, like, again, it's like the male insecurity of, like, she's the big spoon cuddling right now. How pathetic for this boy. But, like, the things he says and how, like, confident he is in the way he says things. There's, like, I'm insecure in my description here because every time I'm like, oh, the idea I would get in my head right now is like, oh, we're switching from, like, generic thing to generic thing. But it's so not, because it's, like, all the things at once, and it's just so well done. But the whole point is, at some point, he, like, is, like, caressing her, and, like, he, like, grabs her leg and then her knee where she got injured, and, like, I couldn't believe it in that moment where I was like, oh, it all comes back to the knee. Like, that's the point of this whole movie. Is like, oh, she just loves tennis. Like, she actually does love tennis more than she loves her family and more than she loves anything. It's, like, crazy that this is this character's motivation. And you sort of realize it in that moment, and the music, like, swells, and it's, like, it was another, like, I referenced it earlier when I was talking about the Madoka, moment I talk about in my most recent script review. I was like, it's the moment where I was like, oh my god, this is a 3-star movie, I can calm down. And then the fucking kiss scene in the red light and the storm that happens after that, I'm pretty sure, and I'm like, greatest movie of all time. I don't think a lot of people care about that scene I'm describing where he, like, grabs her knee, but to me that was, like, the best scene in the movie. I think it, like, even got cut out of the reaction I watched. I was like, oh, you know, I'm a genius. I'm just noticing all the things these little people don't notice. I'm just a genius. People don't like things for the same reason I like things, because I'm so smart. Genius. There's also a line where Zendaya, like, I am, like, almost with zero evidence confident that it was, like, an ad lib where she was, like, because it is very racially, like, what do you call it when you, like, aren't talking about race at all? Because obviously it's, like, a young black girl with her 2 white boyfriends here. And I'm, like, waiting for it to be brought up in the movie, and it very much sets the tone that that's not a part of the movie, and, like, the races of the characters don't matter, until Zendaya has one line where she's like, I'm just protecting my 2 little white boys, or whatever. And it's so funny because I've thought about that line a lot, and I'm like, that's like a bad line. Like, it kind of takes me out of the movie, and it makes me feel like I'm watching Zendaya right now. Like, that's probably something she would say in an interview or something. Again, I haven't seen many of Zendaya interviews. This is all like me reading into things, of sort of perceptions of these people. Just of Zendaya. And like, oh, that has to be like an ad-lib line of something she thought was clever that, like... And it's like something somebody could say about this movie. Like, if you saw a video essayist say, like, and that movie about Zendaya and her two little white boys, it would be like a funny, cute thing that they would say. But saying it in the movie is sort of like, it sort of breaks it a little bit. But then I think I now have come around to thinking it's like emblematically perfect. It's perfectly emblematic of the movie, where it's like, it's that aesthetic thing I was talking about at the beginning. Like, this movie's identity is Zendaya and her two little white boys, and like her little boy toy white boys, and she's gonna stare at them watch them play tennis while she's in her sexy skirt or whatever, and she's gonna judge them, and she's gonna fuck either one of them, and she doesn't give a fuck. And I'm like, oh, that's like the coolest thing in modernity. That's the coolest thing a person can be. And maybe that is why Challenges is great. Maybe Challenges is the movie of our time. It's very interesting. I don't know what else there is to say. You got to watch Challenges. I'm sorry. Like, Alita rewatched one of this director's other movies, that Bone movie that I really should watch now. Even though the conceit of that movie kind of shook me up. I'm like, oh, they're cannibals and they're eating each other, but it's like a love metaphor, and I'm like, ew, eating each other. I don't like that. So I never watched that movie. But now I'm like, oh, if it's handled like this, that would be like saying, ew, Challenges, a tennis movie. I don't care about tennis, Alita already says in his internal monologue. Fucking idiot. So maybe I should go back and watch that movie. I'm also interested in making Alita watch this one day, and because I think it wouldn't be another Polite Society conversation, because it's not a comedy, but I would wonder if he would think it was like, relationship stuff, cringe, or something like that. I don't know. It would be interesting. But anyway, that's Challenges, the greatest movie of all time, greatest movie of 2024 that I watched. It even came out in 2024, right? Oh, it did. I think it's the only movie from this year I watched too that came out this year. But we've got 3 movies to go, 3 of which I watched very recently. Challenges I watched at least a few months ago, I think. Let me just check that this is the last 3. It is. Next up, shifting gears a little bit, we got Ghost in the Shell. Now, this was a rewatch, our only rewatch. Oh, no, X-Men was all a rewatch, huh? But that was like, I didn't really remember anything. The Great Ghost in the Shell, only 83 minutes long, if you can believe it. The first thing that comes to mind from this rewatch, also, I've only given it 4 stars here. This is another one that could creep up to 4.5, I think. The Great Letterboxd says it's 4.1 stars. Speaking of Alita Re again, we're far enough into the video where if you're still here, you must know who that is. Alita Re watched Akira recently. It was very funny because he said, fucking Akira sucks, and he dropped it like 40 minutes in or something, which is very funny to me. I feel like he would do the same thing with Ghost in the Shell. Maybe, it's so short that I don't think he would, but it's like, there are a lot of old anime movies that are sort of just popular because they're popular, and because their aesthetic is cool, I think. And Akira is one of them, and Ghost in the Shell is another one. And like Ninja Scroll and stuff, which is a movie that I recently added to my watch list on Letterboxd again because I'd remembered it, and I was like, I'm probably going to watch that one very early in 2025. So watch out for Ninja Scroll, I guess. Where these movies are like popular because they sort of represent like an edgy something. Like Akira is like the bike and like the little light, and Ghost in the Shell is like the major diving off the thingy and like with her boobs out or whatever. And Ninja Scroll is like all the violence and the raping and stuff. I feel like it's like a very edgy of the time scene thing that I think with fresh Alita Re eyes probably is all really cringe, and really boring. I don't know where I was going with this. I'm just like, what Alita Re's opinion might be of Ghost in the Shell. I could also see him really like he really liked Perfect Blue. But Perfect Blue is like a an ambiguity hellscape that I really should have loved, but I didn't. That being said, I really like Ghost in the Shell this time. This wasn't a build up to say it was bad. It is a build up to say it's a little silly in some regards, where it's like it's so into its themes that it's kind of crazy that like there's like a whole franchise that spun off for this, because like the characters are kind of non-existent. They kind of just exist to look cool, have like two emotions, and then have sci-fi things happen to them. I was building up to a bigger point there, but I've forgotten it. I followed the plot a lot more. I feel like last time... Now, if you don't remember this, I barely remember this, but when I first watched Ghost in the Shell, I reacted to it. Like, actually recorded a reaction in this car, in this very similar position, and I uploaded it to the old channel. It's since gone with everything on the old channel, but I'm pretty sure I rewatched it very quickly after that. I don't know why. But I also didn't really remember much from that rewatch. But this time I was like following it, because I remember the vague details, and she like combines with like the bad guy at the end or something, and she's like a little girl. So this time I was like following the plot, and because I kind of knew where it was going, I could kind of like you can more easily piece together what's probably happening. So that was interesting. I do think I like the plot, but the plot is so much like fake trying to be interesting, like political stuff, like what I imagine, if I'm being cynical, what Metal Gear Solid must sound like, where it's like, and then the secret director took out this guy because of the memes or whatever, because in Metal Gear Solid they're talking about memes, but they're talking about memes in a scientific sense, not a meme. But I was demeaning it like it was talking about memes as in internet funny memes. I'm just so funny and clever and creative, where it's a lot of political jargon that seems like it seems stupid, and like an art person thinks they're being deep right now about government corruption, but it's really just art idiots being art idiots. That was the vibe I got a little bit, but also it was cool, and I did like it. Why am I shitting on Ghost in the Shell so much with like other people's potential criticisms here? I love the montages in this movie. There's two of them, I think, and it might only be two, but obviously the one of her walking around at the city or whatever, and then there's another one at the beginning where it's just like the city, I think, and it's like her in her room. I think Ghost in the Shell has some of the most striking imagery ever in an anime movie, because I'd kind of forgotten about certain pieces, but in remembering the movie as I was watching it, what was going to happen in the future, I was like, oh my god, is that shot that I very viscerally remember right now from this movie? And one of them was the angel coming down to them as they're merging at the end, and I was like, oh my god, I can like see how this thing moves, like the animation keyframes in my head. I was like, it's like so seared in there, and I was like, oh, that's where this is from. And another one is like when she first wakes up afterwards, and it's like the mirror shot of her looking kind of creepy as kind of like a little doll in the mirror, and then the long shot of it coming in and out, and I was like, oh my god. Like, I feel like these two like pieces of animation live like rent-free in my subconscious and have forever, and I'm only just now remembering where they're from, and they're like so visceral and so emotive and stuff like that. And then there's other stuff, like more things that you remember, like her ripping the tank open but ripping her arm off and stuff like that. Or like the bullets shooting up like the Greek tree thing that's like philosophical and stuff, and ties into I'm sure the philosophy of the end of like an AI or a not AI becoming a person and merging together, and reproduction and things like that, that we're tying into at the end. So those are all very strong. Also, like the her floating and then floating up to the surface is obviously another one. That's more of a one that I did remember. And obviously her fighting the dude on the water and stuff like that, and how that's all animated and stuff. It looks fucking sick, bro. And it's only 83 minutes long. I feel like I've kind of said nothing, and I've kind of said everything I have to say about Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell is really good. I really do want to watch the sequel now. I think I might try and read the manga. I might try Standalone Complex and all that stuff. Though I feel like the manga and Standalone Complex are going to be very different from this movie, where we're trying to franchise things and have more fleshed out characters, etc., etc. Whereas maybe the sequel to the movie would be more interesting in the same way this one is. Where it's trying to sort of mood and imagery and cinematography and stuff like that. Part of me is like, should this one be 4.5 stars? Probably hasn't sounded like it since I started talking about it. But it's just got a mood to it, you know. It's really cool and stuff. It is cool. Alita, he wouldn't think it was cool. He would think it was lame, early anime shit that, you know, isn't actually good or has no substance or something. But no, we like that Akira has that bike, and Akira probably is a great movie. And Alita, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And maybe he should stick to modern anime because he doesn't understand it. He's a fucking zoomer, huh? Speaking of old anime, we're moving on to something I haven't talked about at all. I talked about Ghost in the Shell a little bit after I rewatched it on stream. I haven't streamed since I watched Project Eiko last night from 1986, nearly 10 years before that shitty Ghost in the Shell movie. This is a movie I've also given 4 stars, but we'll read the little recap here just so I can refamiliarize myself. Oh, hold on, I got a yawn shot. For these 3 high school students, repelling an alien invasion is as easy as A, B, C. You see what they did there? Because Eiko is the girl's name, and then her friend's name is Seiko, and then their antagonist girl is named Biko. Because, you know, Eiko, Biko, Seiko, or as easy as A, B... You get it. Earth, the not-so-distant future, a city miraculously reborn just 16 years after being completely destroyed by a giant meteor at a... This write-up is terrible, because that was like the end of the sentence. At the prestigious Graviton High School for girls, 2 new students are introduced, Eiko and her ditzy sidekick, Seiko. And then, like, an alien invasion is happening, and Seiko gets kidnapped and stuff, and you gotta fight, but it's not really... The movie's a parody. It is very directly a parody. In that Steven video about Gunbuster, he says there's like an interview with the writer of Gunbuster where he's like, I'm not going to make a serious show. I'm going to make a dumb robot show with girls. It's going to be like Project Eiko. And they weren't lying, because let me tell you something, brother. When they introduced Biko here and she looks just like Kazumi from Gunbuster. I was like, Gunsmith Cats? No, Gunbuster. And the main girl has red hair like Noriko. You're like, oh my god. And they're doing their mech push-ups, and they're all got their little mechs outside because they train in mechs and stuff. I'm like, oh my god, this is just Gunbuster episode 1. Except they fleshed it out a little bit there, and we're taking it way more seriously. Project Eiko is 100% like a comedy parody. Like, there's literally the Fist of the North Star looking character shows up, does the Fist of the North Star, like, punch thing, and Eiko no-sells it and punches him in one shot and wins. And there's like a bunch of other things. Like, obviously this alien invasion is happening, but these girls are having a fight and they don't even notice, and they unravel it, and then one of the girls gets kidnapped and is supposedly the princess from a far off galaxy. But the whole movie, there's been like this side plot of this guy checking in on the girls and being like, oh my god, I think I found our lost princess. And the whole time you think it's Eiko, but it's actually her ditzy friend Seiko at the end. And like, she seems all drugged out when she's alone with the bad guy at the end, but it turns out she was just sleeping with her eyes open, and that's why she wasn't responding and she seemed like she had been drugged. Because that's like a trope, but we were actually subverting it. She was just asleep. Project Eiko is funny. It's also pretty short. It's only 83 minutes also, which I think works in its favor. Every aspect of it is like a comedy parody thing of like stories that would do this plot but seriously. Like her rivalry with the Biko girl. A lot of this is sort of the template for sort of like Team 4 style comedy. Don't get excited, Lyra. You wouldn't like this movie. But like the structure of jokes is like Team 4 style or internet style comedy before it was cool. Like villain giving monologue and then girl turning around and being like, I wasn't even listening. Fuck you, bitch. And like cute girls doing all this stuff, and like the loud sidekick girl that's like cries a lot when she's treated like a normal person and is like horrible, but we actually like her because she's cute and stuff. And like A girl shouldn't pick on her. And like every day when we show up for school, how does this girl have a bunch of new robots she wants the main girl to fight? And the main girl just beats them all in one shot, and then she gets sad. But then it's revealed later, inauspiciously, that the whole time, if the actual girl had not been making robots and had just fought her physically, she was actually like a match for her. And why hadn't she just done that from the beginning? It makes no sense, but that's like the joke. And again, the Fist of the North Star girl shows up and does the punches and her, and everybody's secretly a girl, even these really macho-looking men. And it's like, oh, it's like all these styles of jokes that it's very internet pilled to the point where you're like, oh, how much of that was inspired by this, or is this inspired by similar older things that all, you know how the everything is Devilman thing works. A lot of this movie is fun action sequences and like cute girls and pretty looking animation. And it delivers on all three fronts, I think. The girls are very funny. They're doing the thing. They're going to high school. They're being wacky. There's like at one point, there's like a reoccurring gag of Seiko trying to make lunch for Aiko, but she's really terrible at cooking. And one time, like she just presents the dinner, and it's just like live action cutouts of food, and it's like, oh, that's pretty funny. Their teacher like is screaming at them all the time for being late and stuff, and Aiko always waking up late, and even her like running really fast and breaking different bones of the one spy dude, and all this stuff, and like the alien invasion being built up somewhat seriously at the beginning with the really cool looking captain, but he's actually really incompetent, and like when Aiko goes to fight him at the end, he just like gets sad because he doesn't have any sake and doesn't even fight. It's just like it's all like subversion comedy parody stuff where it's like, oh, and here's where the bad guy gives a monologue. Oh, wait, he can't give the monologue. He's lost his voice or something. It's that type of humor. And I think it was pretty cool. It was pretty funny. I know there's like 17 Project Acos. I don't really know how you do a sequel of this. It could just be funnier, I guess. I know Heath has seen them all. I think, at least. I would be open to watching more of them in the future, though. It was very gunbuster pilled. Very gunbuster pilled at the beginning. I was like, oh my god, it's obvious where that episode 1 influence came from. But then Gunbuster just decided to be serious for the rest of the show. And kind of even serious in that. So I don't know what Gunbuster was thinking over here. It didn't understand the genius of Project Aiko, I can tell you that much. But Project Aiko is pretty cool. We gave it 4 stars. Speaking of 4 stars, we got our final movie, a movie I watched today, Arrival 2016 by Denis Villeneuve. He's French or something, who cares? He also does the Dune movies, or Sicario, I think. Lame, we hate Dune here, even though we haven't seen it. The little blurb here is very short on Letterboxd. Why are they here? ? Taking place after alien crafts land around the world, an expert linguist is recruited by the military to determine whether they come in peace or are a threat. Now, I remember seeing I was like checking to see if we had made it in under an hour, but no, we're already over an hour, and I'm probably going to talk about this one for like 20 minutes. I gave it 4 stars, as I already said. Letterboxd here has given it 4.1 stars. They like it better than me. Can you believe it? I was in the middle of a point there. Oh, and I got a fucking yawn again. I've been yawning this whole fucking recording. I used to yawn all the time in those old fucking movie nights too. I remember seeing in 2016 the trailer for Arrival in a theater and being like, oh my god, that movie seems so cool. Like, it's like an alien movie, but they're like trying to figure it out through language. That's like cool and not actiony, because alien invasion movies are lame. We now talk to the aliens first, and that's much more interesting because I'm a smart 15-year-old, and that's what I like now. Also, it was after like a string, like they had like Interstellar, then The Martian the year later, and then Arrival the year after that, where it was like these kind of like, I have no idea about Interstellar. I don't think it fits into this at all. But The Martian was very much like an optimistic, like everybody works together and all the space agencies to save this one guy. That's kind of in the end what Arrival kind of becomes. And I remember realizing halfway through that that's where we were going, when it's like, oh, we have 1/8 of the picture and we have to share with everybody, but we've closed our communications off. I was like, oh no. Like, The Martian was cool for this because it was like a silly romp where this guy got like stuck and everybody's gonna come and save him, and like we really care about this one guy. And then I thought this was being like, oh, we all have to come together for our mutual good, and I was like, yuck, I hate Attack on Titan. Get this fucking shit out of here. And it kind of still did that in the end, but kind of not. It was way more interesting the way it handled it. I think I'm caught between like criticisms, ill-defined, I want to say research, just because I had these criticisms like partway through watching the movie where I was like, initially I was like, oh, why are we starting with like this baby stuff and then her kid died and now she's going to get recruited and stuff. I was like, this movie was supposed to be like a cool, like finding out how aliens talk and then talking to the movie. And then it basically, I was like, oh no, we're adding a bunch of silly drama to it that I think like cheapens the strength of the conceit. Where it was like, oh, she's going to be motivated by her dead daughter and like, oh, she's going to save the future for them. And then they started doing like China's going to bomb their one, so we better hurry up and go fast. And I was like, no, just let them take the time. I want to see piece by piece how they figure this out, how interesting, science and stuff. And then towards the end, I was like, oh no, it's about cooperation. How about I fucking kill myself? I still think I have some of those criticisms. Like, in my overall thoughts on Arrival, parts of my heart are darkened by those criticisms. Even though the twist at the end kind of invalidates all of them. Or at least changes the context, obviously, with the kid. Because I guess spoilers if you haven't seen Arrival. I've been loose with spoilers for certain things and not for others in this movie, in this video rather. But for this one, we'll talk about all the spoilers. At the end, it's revealed that their language, like the alien language, is how they understand time, and it sort of makes time non-linear for you if you understand their language. Which is a really interesting, cool concept. And then you start to realize that because now the main girl knows the language, then therefore time is not linear for her, and then she's sort of like can see her entire life the entire time, and she's been seeing the future the whole time. And oh, the kid is after it, and it's with Jeremy Renner's character, etc., etc. There was another part where we're like setting up a romance between the two of them a little bit, where they're both like, oh, I'm single because I'm a genius. And he's like, you can still be a genius and be single. And I'm like, ugh. We're doing a love story too? It's like all the silly blockbuster beats you have to hit for this movie to ever get made is what I'm like thinking in my head of like how we have to compromise on the cool stuff. To have the slop for the idiots in the back. But it's all twisted at the end, which makes it like good. And I do agree. And I'm like 80% won over by that, but like that 20% is still distracting me a little bit. And I guess if he's 80% out of 100 is the score we gave it too, isn't that crazy? The ending is great. It does make you think a lot about everything, about it. Arrival sort of plays, and I guess this is what Interstellar plays with too, from the limited amount I understand. Interstellar, because I haven't seen the movie. Time, how we, like, a lot of it is about thinking outside of yourself and how you understand reality, and like, to a different creature that understands reality differently, everything changes. Like, this time linear thing fundamentally would change the human experience to almost something that is unrecognizable. Something that's alien almost. Oh my god, I'm a poet. And sort of it's a very big existential fear, I think. Like, a lot of this movie, first of all, the movie has like all the famous soundtracks you've heard from like the last 8 years, but apparently they're all from this movie. Like, I can't sing it, alright? The big one with the violin or whatever that I've seen in a million YouTube videos, but I can't place a single one, and I searched for it a lot. I thought it was like the Beauty of Sopranos, that Beauty of channel. I was like, oh, I'm certain it's here. I swear it's in like one of these Mad Men compilations. I was like, is it in that one Luffy AMV that I really like? No, that was a different song. And I'm like trying to picture which edits I've seen that use the music from this, and it's like the one song, the dramatic one that's really sad, but like bittersweet, but like your life is flashing before your eyes. And that's exactly what's happening in the movie, where you're like, it's playing with the what if time like just what if you were just sitting here right now and you had an existential moment where you're dying? Like, oh, you just skip through and you see in a compilation like all of these moments in your life of you spending it with your kid and your kid dying and you growing older and like you falling in love and all the places you visit. And it's just like, this is like the most forbidden knowledge that you just, like, I could not function if I knew even a percentage point of this. Like, it's just such an existential dread of like, what if right now time started speeding up and you have like an hour and your whole life is going to go by in an hour and then you're going to die. And it's just like, no, I just want to like, so much of my fear is like wasting time, or not wasting time, but time passing too quick. I was thinking about this a lot today. A thing people like to do a lot is play video games with their friends. My brother spends literally his entire life doing this. Elite RE will fuck me over to play games with his friends. He'll say, I can't record this, fuck you, we'll do it later, just so he can play video games with his friends. I played video games with my friends like 3 times in my life, I think. Most of them were Minecraft. It's probably like 5 or 6 times. And it is very fun. But I remember I would get home and it would be a day where we were going to play on our Minecraft world together. And this only lasted like 2 days ever in a row. And then everybody would get bored or they would go do something else or something. And I remember my experience every time was like, oh my god. I get home, I start playing, and then the night's over really quickly. Because you're having so much fun and the time passes. But by the time you get to the end, you're like, oh my god, it's already 9:30. My mom wants me to go to bed. I didn't do anything today. Like, it's not a productivity thing, but for me, like, the schedule of, like, well, I have to sit down and now I have to check my YouTube subscription feed and I have to open a bunch of videos and then I have to watch 1 or 2 of them and then I have to go and do this thing and then like, that settles, like, the flow of time to me of, like, oh, this is a normal day. I'm doing normal things. I have time to pause and think that I'm doing normal things. But doing those normal things is, like, that is depression. Like, that is you, like, those are the moments where you're like, I'm gonna fucking kill myself. I hate everything about this. I hate watching YouTube videos. I hate scripting a video. I hate doing everything. And the truly fun times are when you forget time is passing. But in sort of a contradiction, and why you can never be happy and you should just give up now and kill yourself, is like, when you're having time, like, afterwards, you're like, oh, the whole day's gone. Like, I never got to stop and smell the roses. Like, everything's gone. My life is over. I'm 50 now. The kid happened. For 18 years, I was so invested in this kid that time went by so fast and I didn't even look down. And it's the Godot speech in Berserk of, like, I was hitting a hammer before I could even walk. And suddenly one day I woke up and I was an old man and I'm on the verge of death, Guts. And what the fuck are you going to do? You fucking moron. Abandoning casket. Can you believe it? So it's the dichotomy of, like, if you can live life slow, but you're going to be miserable, or you can live life fast and it's going to be really fun, but you're going to have regrets that you didn't get to live life slow. But if you live life slow, you're like, man, I haven't done anything with my life. I need to go do something. But doing that would, like, waste a day. Like, I have existential dread of, like, I could go and do things after work rather than just come home and pretend I'm going to work on videos even though I'm not going to. And I'm like, but then I would waste, like, this last afternoon, and I only have so much afternoon before I have to go to work the next day, and, like, it's just going to feel better to me for whatever reason in that moment to not do something, to go home and, like, try and do a lot of things in the first hour. So I look over and it's only like 4 p.m. and I'm like, oh my god, I've done so much and I've got so much time left. And it's this time thing. It's like, it's literally like the bane of my existence. It's the thing I think about the most. And you can so easily play on my dread. And, like, when this fucking monologue is happening, not this monologue, but this montage is happening, and that music is playing, and, like, it's flashing her life before her eyes because she doesn't see time linearly anymore. It's the freakiest fucking thing ever. But I've also seen it done better elsewhere. Like, the Tail Whip music video by Men I Trust. Better song, first of all, even though this song is, like, the soundtrack for this movie is great. But, you know, we're talking about fucking Tail Whip by Men I Trust. It's a top 12 song of all time. Check my secondary ENT list. Well, that very much is just like videos of her from her parents from when she was born to where she is now, and the lyrics are like, "Oh, the country dog won't die in the city." Like she's going to move to a city, she's moving away from everything she's known, she's going to live a life, and like, oh, it's all going to be over in a flash, and that existential dread. So I guess part of me is like, oh, this is like playing with like this theme that really gets to me, but it's like, it's also not getting to me as much as like a simple silly music video, and like, what does that say about the quality of the movie, etc., etc. The other strength of the movie, I think, is in it making you think. And I was reading some letterbox reviews of even like some of my normie friends that I like follow, and even some like of the guys I met in New Zealand, and like they were like film guys, and I in a way I respected their opinion a lot because they were very not our section of the internet film guys, but they were a certain. They were like kind of normie online film guys, but they like clearly in their like group of IRL friends they had like their own way of thinking about things and stuff like that, where it was like insightful. It wasn't just generic shit you would see in a comment section under a video where we're all just agreeing about like the most layer one fucking internet opinion. That guy with the glasses regurgitated fucking shitty video YouTube essayist nonsense. It was like actually unique, and I was like, and I read one of their reviews because one of them had a review under this. I don't know if I want to like read it out because it will like link them, or you could find them or whatever. But he was talking about like how like this movie stuck with him. Like, oh, I'm still thinking about it days afterwards because it's like it is like the thing about it's about the philosophy of the movie and how it actually makes you think about things. And I think to a normal person, now I don't know anything about philosophy, but like I feel like I've thought through a lot of these concepts before of like, oh, time, and like time is like, or like it's not really about time, it's like about limited perception. If you think outside of yourself, and like an alien might not even think about any of these concepts we hold so dear to our understanding of how things function at all. And like if this is like, and I feel like a lot of because a lot of the times from a more cynical like philosophy standpoint, you're like, this fucking art shit when it tries to get philosophical is so cringe. It's like clearly like thematically biased in a conclusion, and like it's only ever going to be this most surface level engagement with the topic, and like you don't really know anything, and then people are going to watch this movie and have a shitty bastardized opinion of the philosophy, and it's like from like a philosophy bro standpoint, it's like, oh, this is fucking stupid, and like, oh, if you actually want the real thing, just go read a book. And part of me is invested in like, oh, that's so right, bro, so smart, yeah, right on. Like stupid movies where they try to be philosophical, fucking kill yourself, Christopher Nolan, you're a fucking loser. Something like Oppenheimer is probably like the bad example of that, where it's like, oh yeah, very clever, fucking Oppenheimer, yeah, we might kill ourselves with nuclear bombs, oh, knowledge we shouldn't have had, oh, genius, and then the final scene of the movie, and it's like, oh, I think we did, it's like, oh, just so cringe, and then you just see people lapping it up, and you're like, what a bunch of fucking idiots. Arrival is sort of on the other end, where you're like, wow, if this was somebody's like first engagement with that like idea, like this would be like mind blowing right now. And like it would be very interesting. It would stick with you, and forever that idea would be tied with Arrival, and that would make it very special to you. And that was sort of the review he was getting at, and I was like, oh, that's like interesting to me, and because I feel like I have that with smaller sort of perception things. Mad Men would do that all the time, where it's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that thing particularly in that way, in that context, and that like changes my how I will perceive things forever. I can't think of an example from Mad Men. I know the old Digibro, now Trixie, of course, used to have that example with Evangelion, where she would be like, oh, Evangelion like introduced like this existential idea to me of like when Shinji's like, oh, the Shinji in Asuka's mind and the Shinji in my mind and the Shinji in Rei's mind and the Shinji in Masato's mind are all different people. And sort of when you like, this is like an existential thought you sort of have in high school, and it like depresses you, where it's like, oh my god, how am I going to control the perception of me in all these people's mind, and how am I going to make it good in all the pretty girls' mind and cool in all the cool guys' minds, and how am I going to present myself, and like, but how am I also going to seem invisible because I'm Shinji too, and I don't want to be seen, and I just want to be left alone, and all this like, oh my god, I can't control the perception of myself to every other person. How about I kill myself? I'm very insecure about all these things, and me just existing in these minds, it just spirals, and it's like, oh, Evangelion is forever epitomized with that, or in your brain with that. Um, I was building up to an actual example, but I can't remember what it was from because it wasn't from Mad Men, but it was from something adjacent. Um, I guess it might be Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but I feel like because that's just the when you're looking at something, something's also looking back at you point, which is also made in Berserk a bunch. But in Berserk, it's like the dark quote about the more you gaze into the abyss, the more it gazes back into you, of sort of like this is a two-way street. Whereas in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it's much more of like an interpersonal perception thing, um, where I do like that is quintessential to how I think about things. Where it's like you're watching this person, you're judging their every move, you're like taking note of like, when you do that thing, you do this thing. Isn't that cute? And like undermining in a sense, or like, and it usually makes you like the person more. Like in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, obviously these are two girls falling in love with each other, and I feel like you do that to like people you have crushes on when you're just sort of like watching them. Creepy. Um, But the point being that, like, you are also being perceived by that person, most likely, unless you're a literal stalker. Um, Even with, like, relationships I've had at work like that, where you'll almost be taken aback in a moment where you're like, like, she was watching you too, or she noticed something. Like, it can be as simple as, like, the girl you have a crush on at work saying, like, like, I remember I walked in one day and I was like, she was like, you're not usually here on Fridays. And I was like, what the fuck? She knows that? Oh my god, she must be in love with me. But even those little things can do like crazy things for your ego. And like, obviously in the Portrait of a Lady on Fire example, it's like, the love example. It's like so intertwined, and it's the gazing thing. Whereas Berserk, it's like, if you're gonna hang out with these demons' guts and you're gonna be very mean to them, you're gonna become a mean bloke. And it's very different because obviously it's much grander in Berserk because it's like, what a commentary on humanity, and it's like, I guess that is also a split here where it's like there's sort of like three commentary like theme things you can do. You can do like grander, like I'm thinking like Apocalypse Now or Berserk or something where it's like, man, human beings sure are violent, and that's sort of like the theming of like everything returns to violence or whatever, and you're doing like a thing there of like you can overcome violence by doing a thingy. And then there's sort of a more philosophical thing, which is more what Arrival does, where it's like time and how we manifest with that, and like the human experience in sort of like a more philosophical sense, rather than I guess or an internal philosophical extent, whereas like maybe the violence one is more of a collective external one. Obviously Berserk is big on collectives and stuff like that. Watch the Griffith video. And then there's also like almost the Portrait of a Lady on Fire thing where it's like interpersonal, which is probably more so romance things where it's like, little quirks between people. Mad Men would very much be in that same thing. And I guess if I look at all the pieces of media I like the most, it is usually those like interpersonal, like this is, I guess it's like psychology, like human behavioral things where it's like, oh my god, that is how people are. Oh, what great identification show. This is truly terrific. What a tangent about themes or something, huh? Arrival is cool. The imagery is cool. The language stuff is cool. The way they build up seeing the aliens for the first time is cool. The misdirect with the opening. Nerdwriter had a whole video about this where it was like, the opening scene and the assumptions you make and how that's sort of like a time-based thing and how that plays into to perception and the non-linearness of time. I guess basically my experience with Arrival was like, I was like scared it was going to be generic in a bunch of ways, and then it very much like decided it was like this sort of like genius thematic thing at the end, where it was like, now this twist lets like a bunch of themes fold in on each other of like time and then perception and then communication and then what that means and assumptions and all this stuff. That is interesting because a lot of it is very interesting. It is very easy, rather, to get existential with all of the sort of ideas it plays with and be like, man, our perception of time really is limited to our individual experience in this meat sack body. And if we looked outside of ourselves to the cosmos, and what if somebody didn't do that? And language. We just use it to communicate. But what if we used it to communicate, like, time? Like, isn't that a cool concept? Et cetera, et cetera. I also know that this is, like, adapted from a book. So I don't know if I should be interested in reading the book or something now. Oh, the twist at the end where it's like she called the Chinese guy and like, but in the future he had to give her the thing so she could remember it then, and then she was like, "Oh, you told me my wife's dying words," and it was like, "Oh, that's from the future or something," and then did that freak him out and that's why he stopped, or like was it a message of peace or something, and her like getting all the accolades at the end and then teaching classes about it, but then also she like decides to have her kid even though she knows the kid's gonna die, and it like reframes the tragedy at the beginning and has sort of the theme about how, oh, even if you can only, like, your daughter can only live for a little while and she'll get sick and die, like, it's still worth it to give her life, or something like that. And then obviously at some point she tells Hawkeye that that their kid is doomed to die, and that she knows it because he doesn't fully know the language, so he can't see time like her, and he ends up leaving her. And obviously if you know your daughter's going to die of cancer and like it's preordained and stuff, maybe you would want to like split ties and not get too connected. And then like the daughter's been drawing things the whole time, and when it becomes apparent that it's a mystery of like who the daughter is, that's like a really great twist. And you're like, oh my god, what's happening here? Is the daughter just a stand-in for the aliens, and like that's why she's drawing the bird and stuff like that? How it slowly unravels like that. It's all very interesting and good, I think. But other than that, that might be all we have to say about Arrival. It made me think about a lot of things, which I guess is kind of the thing everybody says, you know? This movie sure did make me think. But it all made me think about art shit more than philosophy shit, I guess. Now, what's the difference? Who knows? Shut up. And I think that's where we wrap it up. I don't know how we're going to do movie nights in the future. I don't know if I'm just going to wait and do a big one at the end of 2025 too. My goodness. It's... God. So much of my life better be changed in a year is all I'm going to say. That's an existential time thing. I'm running out of time. I'm getting old over here. If I want to do athletic things with my body, I better get it in now. There's a time clock here. If I want to be cool and very successful at a young age and have that perception, you better hurry up. You're going to be mid-20s soon. Oh, maybe I'll look back, be in the same position recording out of the car still. Maybe next time I'll have a face cam in my own apartment and I have 15 million subscribers and we'll all be happy, and I'll quit YouTube or something. Who knows where we'll be in a year. I probably won't be re-listening to this one because I'll probably be lazily stumbling through that one too. My goodness, what a year for movies. If we rank them in order, we've got Challenges is obviously the best one. Then Broadcast News is the second best one. Then Madoka is the next best one. And then probably Arrival, Spotlight, Shakespeare in Love, kind of all mixed. And then Ghost in the Shell and Project A-ko probably mixed. And then X-Men and then Barry Lyndon. There we go, Barry Lyndon, the worst than X3, can you believe it? Let's hope there's even more 5-star movies in 2025. Yippee, it is the year for it after all, because it ends with 5, you see. How clever. But we're signing off. This will probably be the second last video of the year. I've got my year-end recap to get out. I'm working on the PowerPoint as we speak. I was originally going to make this video a PowerPoint and I even started making it, and then I realized how long that was going to take to make, and I should just record it like this. But anyway, support links in the description below. Thanks.